It gives me a great deal of pleasure to introduce to you the keynote speaker for the night. As you well know, our guest speaker tonight is the immediate past District Governor, Lou. He has been closely involved in the formation of this club, and as you all know, it takes a certain amount of getting the club off the ground. And thanks to the Rotary Club for doing a bit of spade work, and many thanks for the Wanaka members who formed the actual club. A great deal has been done, and a great deal needs to be doing yet, needs to still be done. But in the meantime, while we were getting it off the ground, Lou has done a tremendous amount of work. And as you well know, no job is complete until the paperwork is finished. And I can let you know that Lou has done a lot of paperwork, because many things had to be done. Lou, he changed all the bylaws. He had to alter them, check them, retype them. So we made a few rules ourselves, because we had to do all that. That all comes out now. Application forms had to be sent to Rotary International, and some of them came back. Because the T's were not crossed and some of the I's were not dotted. So Lou had to do all that type of work. At one stage, he had to make a special trip to the halfway mark in Roxburgh to get the necessary papers in order. So Bruce, King and Les Christensen came down from Wanaka to the halfway point of Roxburgh, and we met in a very convenient place. It was the Grandfields Hotel. Well, without further ado, I'm happy to introduce to you the man largely responsible for the formation of this club. Ladies and fellow Rotarians, I give you Lou Robinson. A, K, J, K. Now I know what you're thinking, that in spite of Leo's assurances that the formal part of the evening would be got through with due expedition, there's Lou again in full cry, and we're in for a long speech. And you may be right. It depends how many asides I choose to put into this prepared text. Speaking to DG Stan, during the week, make it candid from here on. Speaking to DG Stan during the week, he actively encouraged me to be outlandish. Deny it if you will. I have it on tape. He said, if you were not outlandish, that would be uncharacteristic. And then they throw the TV at me to restrain me. You see, I'm caught in the cleft stick. An incantation, you might say, is not a very good way to start an address, which I'm told is to be about Rotary. But in the context of this particular occasion, it seems somehow inappropriate to separate Rotary from everyday life. The incantation, however, doesn't suggest that I'm going to talk about black magic or other things on the darker side of life. Although the sandwich here between courses, a chant or two might be the very thing to bring back your attention, which is likely to be decidedly less
than rant. It's difficult, I know, to focus attention on anything serious said at this stage of any evening, but do spare a thought for the keynote speaker, who the last thing he would want to be doing is making a keynote speech, and would much rather be just enjoying the occasion in ways that don't include speech making. No longer restrained by the chains of office, I've decided to talk about some of those everyday aspects of life to which I referred, and from time to time to cross-reference to things Rotary, so that you might judge the talk to be at least phenomenally about Rotary, the instructed text. To some, Rotary may be life, in the same way that religion is. Indeed, there is much between religion and Rotary that is common. Just compare the Christian ethic and various statements made by the board of Rotary International to see that connection. But don't be alarmed, well, not yet anyway. I'm not going to talk about religion either, at length, or the other no-no politics at length. So the list of knots is growing: black magic, religion, politics, and maybe even Rotary. This, I think, is going to be a potpourri, a sort of oral medley of taboos. Now, while parallels between religion and Rotary can be drawn, there is also much that contrasts. To my mind, any resemblance terminates strongly in the relationship each has with life. So I can understand for religion that adherents will understand a symbiosis of the spiritual and the physical, but of Rotary I can't see it as an entity. That's to say, something with a real independent existence. When I'm asked to speak about Rotary then, I don't read my brief as speaking about the technical ingredients that make up its bits and pieces, or the rules that guide its development, its growth and its mechanisms. I leave that to district governors. That's not a function for past governors, especially not for immediate past ones who are enjoying their immediate retirement. Rather, I read my brief as speaking about the members of Rotary and how Rotary exists as a vehicle for its members. Rotary will not inspire members. Members inspire each other by flavouring Rotary into an environment conducive to the sort of things that members want to do. Such an environment attracts people to it and makes possible for these people a much broader scope of activity that group action permits. If Rotary has a special function at all, that's it. As stated more directly, Rotary exists to provide a means for its members to provide service, including to each other, not for Rotary per se to provide that service. To read the Rotary International Constitution, one would be excused being under the impression that Rotary International sees things differently. Consider the stated purpose of Rotary International. The purposes of Rotary International are: A, to encourage, promote, extend and supervise Rotary throughout the world, and B, to coordinate and generally direct the activities of Rotary International. To put it another way, in no more plain language, Rotary International exists for the purposes of Rotary International, whose purpose is the purpose of Rotary International. One might think that some churches, as distinct from religions, also exist with similar recursive definitions. I'll get to that word. Such is the stuff of lawyers, especially judges, and fanatics, much as I hate, really, joining them in the same sentence, although in this case the sentence was quite brief, not the mandatory 10 years. Some of you may believe that I have a thing about this recursion thing. I used it in an illustration earlier this year when talking to a Rotary club, which shall remain nameless and which is the oldest club in the district. I do find the concept fascinating because, although it is really a mathematical concept, it seems to pervade so much else, even if not recognised by that name. The earlier group may not have quite got the idea, so this next little bit requires just a touch more concentration. If Rotary International can't, mathematicians can get away with recursive definitions, which, incidentally, for the uninformed, is the method of defining x using x in the definition. So, for instance, they can define a factorial using recursion, and that needs explanation perhaps, in fact, certainly. I'll illustrate. Factorial 4, written floor 4 exclamation mark, is the product 4 times 3 times 2 times 1, which is 24. Factorial 5 is the product 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1, which is 120. But factorial 5 is also 5 times factorial 4. Noticing this, mathematicians, who are sometimes useful if often obscure, define factorial x as x times factorial x minus 1. Now that's really got you on your toes, hasn't it? Don't dare look blank, or someone across the table may think you're stupid. The mathematicians also, incidentally, define the factorial 0 and everything negative as unity to tidy up their definition, which otherwise wouldn't work. Think about that. You don't have to think very hard to see how quickly such numbers escalate, however. There is the story of the pharaoh who lost a game of chess. He was so impressed by the skills demonstrated against him that he offered great wealth as a reward, an emerald necklace or some such. The winner, however, said he was not too interested in that and that he'd rather have wheat, counted as follows. On the first square of the chessboard, place 1 grain. On the second, 2 grains. On the third, 4 grains, and so on, doubling the number of grains on each subsequent square. But the pharaoh protested that this would be insufficient reward. But on insistence of the winner, he duly agreed and began counting. Of course, before long, he was counting in sacks of wheat, and then in ships, and the granaries of all Egypt were there long before the 64th square on the board was reached. That square would have required about 9 billion grains, and the total on the board would have been 18 billion. The winner was a mathematician, who not only being obscure and sometimes dishonest. The discerning among you will know that that result involved a geometric progression, not factorials, but they are related. Some organisations like Rotary and the New Zealand Parliament risk escalation of numbers like that. The immediate past president of Rotary International condemned the amount of time and expense spent each 3 years on the Council of Legislation, which, in his view, spent all of its time telling Rotarians what they couldn't do, rather than in producing ideas for ways that Rotary might be more effective. That expression of opinion, when first voiced, was greeted with gusty applause. But the Council is still to meet every 3 years and its brief has not changed. In Rotary, we do have a penchant for regulation. Our joy in making them is only matched by our joy in ignoring them. I think I may be beginning to sound like Victor Borg at the piano, never quite getting round to anything. The sort of maths that I've been talking about is useful to statisticians and bridge players and others interested in odds and chances. It's also used a bit by economists. Now, I can understand numbers and things like that. In any units the numbers point at, like kilograms or hertz or that sort of stuff, except money. Put a dollar sign in front of a bunch of numbers, push it through an accountant and a tax man and another government department or two, then back through the accountant and back to me on a thing called a balance sheet, and I'm lost. I'm hopelessly lost. It's like finding myself in the middle of a fairy tale, like the ones about the shmoos. Now you know about the shmoos. They occur in the folk tales about little Abner. These shmoos are born big and hungry, and the more they eat, the hungrier they get, and the smaller. Speaking of hungry, don't despair, you'll get to the footies in due course. At a rough guess, I would be almost halfway. Well, that's about how I feel about numbers for the funny S sign in front of them. Most people don't seem to have these problems. In fact, whole nations decidedly thrive on these sorts of numbers, like the shmoos of Zurich, or is it the gnomes, or the people of Scotland who produce blokes like Adam Smith, or of England who produce John Maynard Keynes, or is it Keynes or Keynes, anyway, John Maynard, or the people of Israel who produce the people of Israel. More of those people of Israel shortly. But alas, I suffer. I comfort myself by reading books on economics, and like economists, kid myself I know the real world through a knowledge of the theoretical world. But in reality, if it gets much beyond the so-called closed system, it all gets pretty hard going for me. A closed system is a nice little pile of people who group together to trade only with members of the group. No money flows into the group from outside and none flows out from inside. Sounds nice and tidy, don't it? A sort of self-sufficient economy. There's only one snag. If the heap of money is fixed, then if someone in the group makes a profit, at least one person in the group makes a loss. So closed systems might not work quite so well after all. Whatever the commodity, there must be a flow of exchange across the boundaries of any such group in the interests of the people of that group. And that's true of Rotary too. And this leads us to Plato's famous simile of the cave, or den, according to which those who are destitute of philosophy may be compared to prisoners in a cave, who are only able to look in one direction because they are bound, and who have a fire behind them and the wall of the cave in front. Between them and the wall there is nothing. All they see are shadows of themselves and of objects behind them cast on the wall by the light of the fire. Inevitably they regard these shadows as real and have no notion of the objects to which they are due. At last some man succeeds in escaping from the cave to the light of the sun. For the first time he sees real things and becomes aware that he has hitherto been deceived by shadows. If he is the sort of philosopher who is fit to become a guardian, he will feel it his duty to those who are formerly his fellow prisoners to go down again into the cave, instruct them as to the truth and show them the way out. But he will have grave difficulty in persuading them, because coming out of the sunlight he will see shadows less clearly than they do and will seem to them stupider than before his escape. Noticing the shortcomings of closed systems, groups form into trading blocks or cartels whose objectives are to buy, if possible, only from within the group, but to sell outside it. The result of these amalgamations is a gradual but steady flow of money from outside into these groups. So the ungrouped individuals or countries get poorer, and that is partly what the North-South dialogue is about, and also what some of the argument about aid is about. And that is the anomaly that applies to Rotary if we substitute the words service and ideas for money. It is absolutely vital, if the objects of Rotary are to be realised, for Rotary to be part of a free exchange community. If we don't, in the long term, Rotary becomes irrelevant. We continue to give those to those outside the group who become less receptive to the gifts as they degenerate. We profit most who serve best. How much more profitable it would be for all concerned if we could, for instance, expose ourselves to the reception of ideas from those whose moral and cultural norms are not part of our value structure. on giving and receiving the prophet of Khalil Gibran has some sound advice to the citizens of Orphalese. Amongst it, you often say, I would give, but only to the deserving. Surely he who has received his days and nights is worthy of all else from you. See first that you deserve to be a giver and an instrument of giving. For in truth it is life that gives unto life, while you are but a witness. And you receivers, assume no weight of gratitude, lest you lay a yoke upon yourselves and he who gives. To be over-mindful of your debt is to doubt his generosity. This last piece of advice Rotary might like to heed from the viewpoint of their recipients is answer to those who seek greater publicity for Rotary's deeds. And it tells us something about the TV slots too, doesn't it? But enough of that. Suffice it to restate that there is a need for exchange both ways and for involvement with other groups. Like the schmooze, our appetite for a variety of things, including service, increases with age, but with age, it seems our capacity diminishes. This sort of thing has been alluded to by the party strategist, journalist, Rotary Foundation scholar, and celebrated nitpicker, Simon Walker. I think he's right. If we had that, our troubles, whatever they might be, would dissipate. For we would have created the sort of environment that attracts people to it, and our areas of activity would realise a new relevance, a new vitality. Membership would be less of a problem because where relevance or activity applied to it decline, so declines membership. Membership loss, if that can be isolated as a problem in itself, which it can't of course, is directly related to the level of relevant activity in the clubs, which to me, I remind you, exist for the members, not for the clubs. From the safety of no office, I can say that I disagree with Rotary International for the isolated emphasis it places on membership growth. The mistake is demonstrable. The number of new clubs is increasing at a proportionate rate, double that of the total membership. So all that then happens is that the average size of clubs decreases. I'm certain that if more emphasis were placed on the programs of Rotary, little would be required on membership. Nowhere do I disagree more, I think, on this topic than on the insistence on the formation of new clubs and the pressure directed to district governors for the formation of them. New clubs should be formed only where a community of interest exists, which directs the formation to meet a need. I'm happy to report that indeed is what has occurred in the formation of the Rotary Club of Wanaka. Right now, I will state our thanks to Leo Grunewagen and the Rotary Club of Balclutha for seeing to its formation, and to the members of the Wanaka Club, welcome aboard, and thanks too for being such a helpful part during those formative months. Now, I started with an incantation, and it's probably time to give an explanation of it. Then was I at a geriatric home as a visitor, reviewing the structure for a proposed redevelopment, with the Ministry of Works and Development's likely response in mind, but otherwise minding my own business, muttering to myself things like, that unreinforced brickwork beside the stairway will have to be improved and secured in case it comes down in an earthquake and blocks those poor people from getting out of the building. And that bit's probably okay, but I wonder what's underneath the plaster. The old builders covered up a multitude of sins, didn't they? Chip, chip, hack, hack. Look, it's reinforced concrete. Well, it's concrete anyway. I wonder if it is reinforced. I'll have to come back to that. And so on. My consciousness was gradually pervaded by an incessant chant from one of the rooms. In due course, I passed the open doorway and saw the source. A very old woman was lying on the bed, facing stiffly to the ceiling, with her head turned back on a pillow, and she chanted in deep concentration a jumbled alphabet. Her eyes were screwed tightly shut and her hands fisted in her efforts to get it right. Or was it her name she was trying to spell? Revolving the memories of the old schoolyard where once she laughed a lot. That poignant scene had an immediate and profound effect on me, as often they do on all of us. It was some time before, in a more contemplative mood, the reasons for that effect became clear. Among these, first, it reminded me of the lost people whose usefulness to society is no longer recognised, and they get parked into an often lonely and irreconcilable void. The sort of people we want to help but feel helpless to help, but can help through membership of organisations like Rotary. Second, it illustrates the point I made earlier about the need for cross-flow of ideas and information across the boundaries of our societal groups, carried across by people with whom we do not necessarily share a daily community of interest. Consider the wealth of history, information and wisdom that old woman may have brought to our group. That is, of course, had she been more coherent, perhaps she became incoherent through lack of stimulus, lack of practice, lack of a sense of belonging. Third, in the words of Jared Manley Hopkins in his poem, Felix Randall, the seeing the sick endears them to us too it endears. Rotary, I think, should expose itself more often to risk, the risk of shock, the risk of being offended, the risk of close encounters of a meaningful kind. Fourth, and here the thrust of the words turned to the Rotarians of Wanaka. Perhaps they all were anyway throughout. When the quieter times demand an accounting, it is the early years that come most readily to mind, for it is the start that is the greater part of the total journey. The start that this club gives itself, sets its characteristics for the future. Therefore, don't be afraid to be individual, to be unusual, to take the risks, to give it a go. And then there was the one about, it's usual sometimes, isn't it, to throw a joke in. It seems that every joke has someone who bears the brunt. Every joke is told at someone's expense. Like for everyone that makes a profit in a closed system, someone makes a loss. I'm not very good at telling jokes, I'm not going to tell one. So this next is not intended as a joke, rather as an illustration. It was to be one told by a German Jew in a German Jewish accent, but I couldn't get the accent right. He kept coming out sort of double Dutch, Leo. A cross between a double Dutchman and one of Martin's robbers at the Cadrona. So it's told by a native Otagoite instead, James K. Baxter, another story altogether. James K. Baxter in a less sombre mood than usual. It's called The Lament for Barney Flanagan. Flanagan got up on a Saturday morning, pulled on his pants while the coffee was warming. He didn't remember the doctor's warning, your heart's too big, Mr. Flanagan. Barney Flanagan sprung like a frog from a wet root in an Irish bog. May his soul escape from the tooth of the dog. God have mercy on Flanagan. Barney Flanagan, R.I.P., rode to his grave on Hennessy's like a bottle cork boat on the Irish Sea. The bellboy rings for Flanagan. Barney Flanagan, ripe for a coffin, 18 stone and brandy rotten, patted the housemaid's velvet bottom. Oh, 'tis you, Mr. Flanagan. The sky was bright as a new milk token, like Bill the bookie and Shellshock Hogan waited outside for the pub to open. Good day, Mr. Flanagan. At noon he was drinking in the lounge bar corner with the sergeant of police and a racehorse owner, when the angel of death looked over his shoulder. Could you spare a moment, Flanagan? Oh, the deck was cut, the bets were laid, but the very last card that Barney played was the dead man's trump, the bullet of spades. Would you like more air, Mr. Flanagan? The priest came running, but the priest came late, for Barney was banging at the pearly gate. St. Peter said, quiet, you'll have to wait for 100 masses, Flanagan. The regular boys and the loud accountants left their nips and their 7 ounces as chickens flew when the buzzard pounces. Have you heard about old Flanagan? Cold in the parlour, Flanagan lay like the bride at the end of her marriage day. The waterside workers' band will play a brass goodbye to Flanagan. While publicans drink their profits still, while lawyers flock to be in at the kill, while Aussie barmen milk the till, we will remember Flanagan. For Barney had a send-off, and no mistake. He died like a man for his country's sake, and the Governor-General came to his wake. Drink again to Flanagan. Despise not, O Lord, the work of thine own hands, and let perpetual light shine upon him. That illustration, I think, really says it all. Whatever we are on about in Rotary, the deal is about people. And these people are ordinary people. The boisterous and the calm. The plain, the simple, imperfect people like us. And all that I have said before is moderated in that light. With that realisation, Rotary is seen, for all its complex structure, really as simple as AKJK.